Prey is a 2022 sci-fi horror action movie written by Patrick Azon and directed by Dan Trachtenberg, the pair of fellas who brought you 10 Cloverfield Lane, which wasn't a bad movie if you don't mind movie endings that punch you in the stomach when your head's turned away. It's the 5th installment in the Predator franchise, and it serves as a prequel to the first 4 films. For the thousands of you saying this is the best Predator movie since Predator, of course, I respect your opinions, but come on, is that supposed to be some kind of an accolade? Look what you're comparing it to. Prey has pissed me off because it got so friggin' close.
The plot.
The year is 1719, exactly 2 years after Keith Richards was born. And a young Comanche girl named Naru, who's trained as a healer, has decided she'd rather be a hunter like her brother.
What? 20th Century Studios. It's owned by Walt Disney.
While she's out with her dog tracking a deer, she mistakes a spaceship in the sky as a sign she's ready to start bringing home the bacon. The next day, while Naru's gathering flowers, the boys head out to track down a mountain lion that ripped open one of the tribe members. So she tags along, and after they find the wounded warrior, they set up a primitive MASH unit and get to work on healing their fallen friend. And once he's sorted, her brother sticks around to grab them some mountain lion ribs to barbecue later that night. But on their way back, Naru notices the predator's unusual tracks and a fully skinned rattlesnake. So she circles back to tell her brother what she's found. The siblings set up a trap, and while they're waiting up in a tree for something to happen, one of the hunters reminds Naru how much of a badass he is. And while he's in the middle of reminding her, the mountain lion plucks him from the tree and eats his badass. As Naru's about to square off with it, a strange light in the distance distracts her.
And in case you forgot this was done by a cartoon company, the girl who wanted nothing more than to be a hunter just got distracted by bright lights in the distance while the mountain lion that just killed somebody in front of her cornered her on the end of a branch of a tree.
She wakes up at the camp after her brother carried her back to safety. Her mother teaches her the real purpose of the Katamiya rite of passage, or the hunter's first hunt that she's so desperate to get in on. She's reminded it's nothing to do with satisfying her own ego. When her brother brings the mountain lion's body back, Naru's convinced there's still something else out there, but nobody believes her. And after her brother imparts the most sensible, kind, calm advice imaginable considering this takes place 300 years ago, she heads out with her dog the next day to prove everyone wrong anyways. Will Naru learn enough to prove herself to herself? Will everyone else start seeing Naru the way she wants them to see her? Will she even survive? And if she does, what will be left of her perfect hair?
Let's take a look at the cast.
The cast.
25-year-old Indigenous American actress Amber Midthunder plays Naru. She's done regular work in the FX series Legion and the CW series Roswell, New Mexico. And although her role in this movie as a female that rejects gender-based expectations is far from original, she certainly commits to it with a ferocity that may actually rival that of the Predators. What starts out as a somewhat predictable desire to buck tradition becomes a desperate fight for survival against a foe who systematically dismantles wolves and bears as a weekend hobby. In her desire to hunt, she takes up a weapon, and this act renders her prey in the predator's eye. And given her obvious inexperience and propensity to fuck things up, she's got a hell of a fight on her hands if she wants to make it out alive. Dakota Beavers is a young American actor from Arizona, and this is his first ever movie. Dakota plays Naru's older brother Tabe, an accomplished Comanche hunter. He's wise beyond his years and he does his best to impart his earned wisdom, but his sister has her own ideas, most of which go against everything Tabe knows to be true, but he supports her anyway. This predator is played by 6'9", 245-pound Dane DeLegro. He's an actor and, not surprisingly, a former basketball player. This predator is nothing like any we've seen before, in appearance or ethos. The original Predator had an honor about it. If you weren't worthy as an opponent, you were probably going to walk away from the exchange. But this Predator's not looking for a challenge. He's a fucking bully. And for better or worse, that totally changes the vibe.
The good bits.
Unlike many of the other Predator sequels, this movie has a simple, straightforward survival plot, and it actually takes itself seriously.
Was this a necessity given the plot and the new setting? Probably, but it benefits the story either way, so who cares?
And speaking of setting, Canada is a fucking beautiful country. It's diverse and vast and wide open and sickeningly claustrophobic and teeming with life and potential dangers from every direction. And it's all of those things in its natural state, making it the perfect backdrop for a movie like this. Setting it in a different time was also a great move, and one John and Jim Thomas, the writers of the original Predator, had been talking about for years. Removing the access to the comparable weapons and technology just piles the adversity onto the potential prey.
And adversity in movies is really, really good.
I think if they're going to continue with this thread, they'd be wise to expand on the idea of branching out in terms of new locations and different time periods. When the Prey trailer dropped, a lot of people got a severe case of the Mary Sue shivers. And for those of you unacquainted with the expression,
Mary Sue is a term used to describe fictional characters, sometimes female, but not always, who've been written so perfectly that their lack of flaws renders them entirely boring to watch.
Admittedly, I was one of those people. A young girl doesn't want to comply with gender-based roles and expectations, and why should she have to? Because she's perfect, and she eventually goes on to prove her perfection to everyone who ever doubted her.
But Naru's only kind of like that.
Despite believing she's great, she fucks up a lot, and she proves herself to be a liability. Her brother even tells her directly,
"You tried it. You couldn't bring it home."
So in this sense, she's no Mary Sue. In this sense.
Finally, in the good bits, I want to say the kills in this movie were cool. And they were cool. But this observation comes with a caveat, which brings me nicely to
The shite bits.
saying the kills in this movie were cool and leaving it there would be like patting the school bully on the back for going to town on the kid in the wheelchair who gave him a funny look. I called this Predator a bully for a reason. The short scene early on gives us an insightful glimpse into its psyche. Or more accurately, lack thereof. He tears apart an innocent wolf with futuristic weaponry as it's trying to catch its dinner. He was even invisible while he was doing it, and after he's slain the furry foe, he screams victory to the four winds. Predators skip around the solar system looking for worthy opponents. Arnold and the gang from the original Predator were worthy opponents. This Predator decided he'd had enough skinny, hungry wolves, so it was time to move on to a bunch of half-naked teenagers with sticks.
To create proper conflict, you need two equal, opposite, opposing sides. And I'm sorry, but nobody on planet Earth in the 1700s qualifies, accomplished hunters or not. Never mind a 5'5", 120-pound pretty girl who picks flowers for a living. And I've got no problem with flowers.
Speaking of Earth in the 1700s, what's with the dialogue? If you turn your head sideways during any of the amateur cardboard conversation, it could easily be a scene from Stranger Things, and that alone undoes so much of the effort put into making this setting believable. And if I'm being nitpicky, which I sometimes am, there's a few other minor infractions. The CGI was bullshit, especially given Industrial Light and Magic was involved. Naru's motivation is the wrong kind of motivation to write a story around. I said she wasn't entirely a Mary Sue, but she does believe she's fantastic at hunting the entire movie.
Which she is not. And
300 years ago, it wouldn't make any sense for her to switch roles within the tribe. And I'm willing to bet if she even broached the topic, she'd probably end up worse for wear. So saying she wants to hunt because everyone thinks she can't makes absolutely no sense.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
was that a hat tip to the original Predator? Because if it was, I want to do one.
Who gave her the chopper? In the first Predator, the bleeding was a revelation. It was something to give them hope. But in this movie, it comes out of left field like one of the buffaloes, and it's just as subtle. The creature spends 99% of the movie invincible against the biggest predators Earth has to offer. It starts out with the speed to tag a rattlesnake mid-strike and the strength to hold a bear over its head. And within the last 10 minutes, it gets caught in a mud puddle and shoots itself in the head to facilitate Naru's victory. And it had to do that because they didn't spend any time progressing Naru through a story arc. She went from fuck-up to fighting machine in a single scene. So, should you watch Prey if you haven't seen it already? Or should you skin it and proudly wear its pelt like a French-Canadian explorer?
Well, I suppose with all the hype around it now, you're gonna have to watch it either way. Don't get me wrong, I am not saying this movie is terrible. It got a lot of things right. But despite the acting being bang on, nobody really stood out to me. And that's unfortunately a writing problem.
But considering Patrick Azon wrote the movie over 5 years and 9 official drafts, it seems like he forgot to make any of the characters interesting.
But the action is great, the pacing is fantastic, and the movie's only 90 minutes long. So if you're on the hunt for something to kill an hour and a half on a Sunday, this might be your movie. Until next time, folks. It's me, Johnny, from that thing you just watched. If you enjoyed it, go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe. And if you want to watch another thing, there's one right there. Do it!